Welcome to my very first garden tour. I've been meaning to do this for a couple of months, but kept getting caught up in trying to get my garden to a good enough spot to do a tour. And I just realized yesterday that day is never coming because gardens are never perfect. And when I've watched these videos from other creators, I don't expect their gardens to be perfect, and I learn more from them when they actually show their mistakes. So I am going to do that today, even though it feels a little bit uncomfortable. So just to establish setting, I have a really small backyard garden and then a lot more in the front yard. So we'll go through the backyard first. This bed looks a little bit sparse right now, but it's going to really fill in once that squash gets going. I planted another squash back there, but didn't realize exactly how shaded out it was going to be. That's going to be a theme you're going to see for this year for me. I direct sowed a lot of my squash and just didn't realize that it was going to be completely not getting enough sun. So that's kind of sad, but lessons learned for next year. And then for this pickle, or it's going to be pickle, for this cucumber plant, I'm actually growing little baby gherkin style. So it's just getting going, but I love that style of pickle. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing if I get enough to actually make some pickles out of this year. I probably should have planted a couple more of these. I have corn in a couple of spots. I can't remember which type of corn I planted here. These are probably ready to harvest, and once I harvest these out, then that'll probably give the little squash back there a little bit more sun, and it might have a fighting chance. We'll have to see. This bed did have cabbage in it, and since then the runners on the strawberries have gone crazy. One of my goals today is to root some of those runners in little pots so I can transplant them to other areas of the garden. And my shallots are done and probably not really going to bulb up all that much, and I think I'm just having a hard time accepting the fate, accepting the reality that I didn't really do that great of a job planting my shallots this year. Once these fall over, you're kind of done, I think, but I am probably just going to leave these in here for a little while longer to see what happens. And there's a weed. If you see all this dust on my plants as well, that's because this house got built literally inches away from my garden. So I need to come through and spray all these trees off because they've just got a ton of construction dust on them, and that's been really fun too, having to kind of rinse everything off a little extra carefully. This arch has a couple of paste tomatoes on it, and this is kind of crazy. I have not been able to find an explanation for this, but my sun leaves on a few of my tomatoes over the past 2 years have ended up looking kind of like this. It's hard to really describe what's happening here, except for that it's extra long and the leaves are kind of curled and suckers are sprouting off of the sun leaves. And so I don't know what that could be, like maybe a excess nitrogen issue, or I honestly have no idea. Even though I'm pruning the suckers from the places where they normally grow, I'm still getting a ton of suckers. I did a video about how to plant bare root fruit trees earlier this year, and most of them are doing really well. I'm just letting them grow without pruning or training them so much this year so that they can develop really good roots. This pear is the only one that has developed some kind of, I think, fungal issue, and I'm not really sure why. This is, I think, only supposed to happen if you are in a more humid area, but again, we're right under all this construction dust, so I kind of wonder if that has something to do with it. Next year I will see if anything happens, and if it does, then I might bring in some kind of spray to help mitigate that. I also have a couple of grapes that I'm trying to grow over this arbor so that it can provide a little bit more shade. My dog loves to be out here, but it gets too hot so easily. Along with these trees, I'm trying to establish a perennial bed here, so I have perennial kale. I'm not harvesting anything from it this year, or I will probably just wait until the end of the year to harvest. And then I've got asparagus and Egyptian walking onions. Again, I think that's a little bit too shaded out. That might be the only one that has survived and fully put out some bulbs. But I have heard that you can plant those little bulbs. It's that time of day where it's too hot and she has to go back inside. It's only like 8 a.m. These are some of the fall starts that I have going. I'm going to start more today because, no lie, these are looking a little bit rough. I made a dumb mistake yesterday and accidentally left them out in over 100-degree weather for a little too long. I've been trying to harden them off to get them ready, but I went too hard. I have a couple garden towers with strawberries in them. I think next year I might leave the strawberries in the beds and plant something else here, like lettuce. I found that the strawberries really struggle to overwinter in these, and I think the whole point of buying strawberries is having them for a few years. And I just honestly cannot be bothered with taking these into my garage every year. And I thought that I was out of room for tomatillos this year, but I have a surprise tomatillo. These typically you need 2 plants to get any production out of, but I am just going to leave this one and see what happens, because I have heard that they can produce, they just won't produce as much, which honestly, if you've ever grown tomatillos, it's either you have a million pounds or zero. There's no in between. So maybe I'll get an in between with this. Every year I think about getting a billion citrus plants, and this year I finally did get one Thai lime because I do make a lot of Thai curry and I cannot resist a variegated situation, and I got this variegated calamondin as well. Oh my god, and this is so exciting. Looks like blossoms maybe. Yay. I decided that deserves a spot on the table so I can keep an eye on that. This is parsley that I planted last year and is going to seed this year. I'm really excited to save the seeds for this. Maybe I won't have to buy parsley ever again. Then this is my tomato, pepper, and basil alleyway. I got really sick during the main time of the year when you're supposed to be planting a lot of things out, and therefore a lot of my things are just not labeled, so I don't know exactly what a lot of these things are. All I know is that I planted in themes that made sense to me at the time. So I have purple cayennes here. I am 99% sure these are serranos. And then I've got jalapenos, the first few coming in here. This always happens where I accidentally overplant. I was not expecting this marigold to be like 4 feet tall. So it is shading out a couple of my peppers, and I need to come through and prune to make sure that this poor guy, has enough sun. This fig tree, now that this house has been built, does not have enough sun, and it's still growing, which is kind of surprising, but I am going to have to move it, I think. My original intention was to have something that was big enough to kind of compete with that one, but I don't know. I think I'm just going to have to put something here. I've thought about maybe doing like a habitat thing, like a little water fountain, something like that, because this is always in the shade. And I think bees, hummingbirds, other birds would really like a little shady spot right there that they can stay cool in. In this bed, because it gets so little light, is supposed to be my herb and salad bed. And as you can see, I have surprise potatoes, and that's another theme you're going to see a lot. Honestly didn't even plant potatoes in this last year, but there must have been some scraps in my compost that were not fully composted, and that's the risk I run because I'm a lazy composter. And welcome to the front yard garden. It is such a beautiful day out today. I do live in an HOA, and I did have to do some convincing with my neighbors because I literally had nothing here and I did not take care of it before I started gardening. But luckily they were really open to it, and I think that this has overall gotten me outside and gotten me to get to know them better. My raspberries have gone completely insane. I need to come out here and do a raspberry reset. I probably am going to do a video on that in the future. Managing these, it's just once a year, but it is kind of a big project once a year, and you have to do it in the middle of summer, so it kind of sucks, but I absolutely love having all these raspberries. Some of my very first memories are of picking raspberries in my parents' backyard. And so it's just, I mean, I get to relive that every time I'm out here. This is probably, like I said, my last year of planting potatoes in beds, because I also ended up having potatoes in this bed and I wasn't planning on it. I might harvest some of these out even though it's a little bit early and just roll with the new potatoes, because right over there I have a squash that has been really struggling because it didn't have enough sun. The crazy thing about squash is if they don't have enough sun, they will just sit there. They don't really die, they just don't grow, which makes sense because there's no sun, but I'm going to see if I can give it sun and see if I can give it a fighting chance. In this bed, I have a ton of Anaheim, banana, and cubanelle, and poblano peppers, along with a ton of carrots. I ended up accidentally overplanting this bed, partly because, like I said, I've got surprise potatoes, And once the potatoes had come up, the peppers were already established, and I did not want to dig them out. But I just really aggressively pruned the potato plants so that the peppers weren't actually shaded out. And so far, it's actually working pretty well. I have poblanos earlier than I ever have, so I don't know. I can see some of the carrots are getting really big, so I think I'm just going to harvest one of those. Okay, this is always really exciting for me. You never know what you're going to get with carrots, but with this one, you can tell it's like looking pretty big. One tip I've heard, if you have a really big carrot and you don't want it to break off, is to push down first, because that's going to release all of the like feeder roots and then you can pull up. So I'm going to try that. And this, I think I'm forgetting the variety, but this is the Tromboncino squash from Row 7 Seeds. I tried growing it instead of zucchini. I think I might be like the only person that enjoys regular zucchini more, but also this plant is struggling a little bit. At first I thought it was maybe just normal wilting because it's been so hot, but you can kind of tell there's a little bit of yellowing on the leaves, which is telling me that there's some chlorosis and possibly nitrogen deficiency, which would be kind of surprising because nothing else seems like it's having that issue. I think there's still time for me to plant a zucchini, so I'll probably get on that today. This is my attempt at a blueberry patch. I don't suggest putting it in a spot where it's going to get totally baked by the sun, but I have a border of creeping thyme in the spring. There are tulips here, and then a couple of the blueberries, despite having pretty alkaline soil, I have been using a blueberry fertilizer, and a couple of them did produce, which is kind of fun. I just planted these in last year. I'm also going to spread more of this creeping thyme basically everywhere instead of having grass in the places where I'm not walking, because bees really love it. It's gorgeous all year long. It smells amazing, like 10 out of 10. And in this bed, I planted things that I am going to eat in their dried state. So beans, dry beans. I can't remember exactly what variety, but I'm pretty sure it's this Orca's Wolverine variety. It's black and white. I think I see a dry pod, so I might try to open one. Some drying peppers, so they're going to take a really long time to mature. And this corn is also going to dry on the stalk. So by the time it is like harvesty season, that I think is going to look really cool, and I'll be able to harvest those ears of corn. And I don't know, I might try making like masa out of them, or cornmeal. I'm looking forward to that. It should be pretty fun. Harvesting dry beans is like so addicting. Funny, so some of them look like they are brown, and they just might not be completely done. So the way that you can kind of tell if you can dent them at all with your nails, they're not quite done. These are, so interesting. And I accidentally dropped one. Um, so yeah, they're not, they probably look kind of black and white on camera. They're definitely brown and white. Dry beans are one of those things that I enjoy growing because this is so fun to just shell them for me for some reason. But it's like definitely not economically like the smartest thing. One thing I planned that did actually work well is this corn provides a little bit of shade to this bed in the afternoon. The sun coming from right here, the hottest part of the day is like 6 to 7 p.m. And this little squash plant, especially, and I've got some fall veggies planted there too, they really benefit from being shaded by this corn. So that was intentional and it did work. It didn't work very well here, and probably is one of the reasons that some of this squash is actually growing. So thankfully it didn't work, but that's something that I might repeat next year. And then in all of these tall beds, I have sweet potatoes growing out of the front and kind of spilling over. You can eat sweet potato greens, and so I've been doing that instead of spinach. And then I have melons growing up these trellises. So these are watermelons. All of them are little baby styles because the trellises really can't handle anything bigger. And then regular melons on these too. So exciting. Oh, it looks like that was dented by something. Oh well. It looks like this bed is kind of struggling as well. The sweet potatoes here have a little bit of chlorosis again. So there might be a nitrogen problem here as well, because the other three are doing incredible. And yeah, so I'm not really sure, but both of these plants seem to be struggling just a little bit. So I'll have to figure that out. This is an experiment. This is supposed to be an artichoke that produces within 1 year and produces in the fall. I have not watered it at all. My thinking is like this is a thistle family plant. And so thistles grow really well here on their own. They don't need any water. So it hasn't grown a ton, but I'm excited to see if that works because they are really beautiful plants. And if I could have a few more of these, I would love to. I think the variety is Colorado. And then we're in the mini orchard, or at least part of the mini orchard, with the flower bed. The flower bed really needs to be cleaned up. I have a mix of native plants in there. One of my big projects for the rest of this year and next year is to fix this flower bed area, make it a little bit more pleasant. I am going to sheet mulch and put wood chip down where the rest of this grass is and plant low growing perennials that don't need to be mowed. I don't walk through here a ton, but I am going to add a path. And just to go over the fruit trees, I have a mini nectarine here. There is a service berry behind that big sunflower. That was a volunteer. I've got two cherry trees back there. The one in the middle here is an apricot. It's actually a sweet pit apricot. You can eat the pits, or you can eat the seed within the pit, that is. And then I have another mini nectarine here, a very tiny one. This one was planted at the same time as the other one, but has just kind of struggled for some reason. I planted milkweed and did not realize that milkweed is kind of aggressive, so I need to cut some of this down. I don't think that I have ended up having any host caterpillars, but I will be like thoroughly checking before I cut anything down. Milkweed seeds are really small, and these seed pods are huge, and so I'm a little bit like, I gotta take care of those before they spread everywhere. Definitely needs a lot of work. I have a mix of apple trees and peach trees back here. This is actually a hazelnut tree. So yeah, getting this area fixed up for the fall is definitely one of my big priorities. If it was perfect, then I wouldn't have anything to do. So there you go. If you enjoyed this, let me know in the comments and let me know like how often you like to watch garden tours. Is it like once a month, once a season? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate anyone who has taken the time to watch this, and I can't wait to do it again.